Okay, thank you everyone for joining us for our evening edition of the last Family Forum of 2020. If you haven't done so already, please drop your name into the chat or send it to me in a private message, and that is the way that we capture attendance in these meetings. So a few upcoming events and important things that I would like to highlight for everybody. Tomorrow, digitally, the interim reports for the second marking period will be released. If you're not familiar with what interim reports are, those are the mid-mark of the marking period, midpoint of the marking period, where there's a PDF that typically it's sent home in a hard copy, but in the digital space, we access them all virtually. And it's really meant to give a pulse or, a better understanding of where your child is in all courses halfway through the marking period. So please stay tuned for a family letter that I'm going to share tomorrow via Remind and email, just reminding folks how to sign up for the parent portal if you're not already signed up. You can also access your child's interim reports through their student portal. They can log on directly. But if you haven't done it before, it can be a little bit tricky. So I'm going to just send out a letter reminding everyone on how to do that. I also wanted to give another plug for our SAC meeting, our School Advisory Committee, which was meeting in the new year. We meet roughly once per month, and everybody is welcome to join, even if you're not an official member of our SAC. So our next meeting is Monday, January 11th. Our meetings are always on a Monday at 4:30, and they happen on Zoom. This upcoming meeting is important because I'll be sharing some information about our winter Title I information, and it's an opportunity to have a dialogue around what Title I looks like at CW Henry School. And we have a couple special events because it is what we call a community meeting. So there's going to be a couple presentations from the SAC and some additional information about things going on at Henry. This is one of those things that I would just like to highlight, and I did highlight in the last Family Forum as well. We are hoping to nominate one teacher at CW Henry School to hopefully be recognized for the district's Lindback Award for Distinguished Teachers. This is a really awesome award that honors 60 teachers across the entire city each year. In person, there's usually a wonderful ceremony that happens, but the teachers receive a sizable check as well as a certificate, and it's just a really impressive recognition. The way that we select a teacher at Henry is that we seek input from families, recommendations, nominations. It could be your child's current teacher. It could be a teacher who you've worked with in a different capacity at Henry. Everybody is eligible except for Miss Paulino, who was one of our winners 2 years ago, our music teacher, as well as Miss Schechter, last year's winner. So if you are interested, I will drop this link into the chat. I'm going to share it as well in the letter that I send out tomorrow, but please bookmark that for yourself if you'd like to fill it out at a later time. And I definitely invite you to join our SAC committee if you would like to be part of the conversation on how we select the teacher who we want to nominate at Henry. We're going to be doing that during the month of January. This is also a reminder from the last meeting that we held that Mr. Brogan and his team, he has 2 graduate student interns who work with him full-time every day. They host counseling office drop-in hours. So that happens during our universal lunch period from 12 to 12:45. It's a time to check in for students, but also adults. If you're around and you have a question for any member of our counseling team, you can feel free to log on as well. It doesn't need to be anything formal. It's really meant to just be a time where if a child or an adult wants to check in with any of them, this is their availability. So this flyer with the Bitmojis is uploaded to everybody's Google Classroom, but you see it here as well. So the next part of this presentation shifts gears a little bit. I wanted to spend some time talking about what the School District of Philadelphia's Board of Education has rolled out as their goals and their guardrails. So if you listened or tune in to the board meetings, these were shared publicly at the meeting. I believe it was a couple of weeks ago, the first or second week of December. So these are some important changes that are happening with the Board of Education, which absolutely will impact the school-wide goals and the way we monitor progress towards goals at Henry. And so what I'm trying to do is just try to get ahead of this. This is relatively new information. I want to share a little bit of information around what our metrics are at CW Henry in relation to these goals. And in this morning's meeting, we had a really, really powerful dialogue, and a lot of really great questions were asked around, well, what do these goals mean at Henry, and how do we make, how might we add on to some of them to make this the most meaningful work being done at our school? So I'm not going to read the slide to you. It is some background information shared from the board presentation about what the purpose of these goals and guardrails are. As the Board of Education is the governing body of the School District of Philadelphia, it truly is their responsibility to set the bar for the expectation, of course, for Dr. Hite and his leadership, and then what that means on the school level in our individual schools. So in order to better achieve their vision and to make sure that their meetings and the work of the board is always focused on students, the most important, what we're all here for, students, right? They are working to set some clear learning goals across the entire city. So in the past month, the board has held, I believe they called them community meetings, forums, where they shared some of their ideas about their goals and their guardrails with different community members to seek some feedback. And so this is their finalized version, of their goals and guardrails. And I wanted to just share it with you. It's important to me that our CW Henry community is as informed as possible. So I'm going to drop this in the chat if you are somebody who's following along on your computer at home and you prefer to view something on your own screen. This is a document, the link that I just dropped in the chat, it goes to the board's agenda, and I'm going to go through some of this information in chunks, but there are 3 or 4 goals that we're focusing on and 4 different guardrails. So the next couple slides, I'm going to show you a preview of what those things are. If anything comes up for you, like a question as I'm going through these goals and guardrails, please drop it in the chat. It's something we could talk about in the discussion. And I'm really wanting to share this information because the question I'd like everyone to keep in their mind is how can we make these goals and this work as purposeful as possible at CW Henry School? With our teachers, I always talk about how we don't want to do something just to do it. We want to do it to make sure that it's actually meaningful and positively impacting our students and their learning. So I'm trying to approach these goals and guardrails in a similar manner. This second document, I'm not going to talk about it in as much detail, but I just want to share it with you. Again, these are all publicly available on the school district's website, but this is their progress monitoring calendar and how they've pinpointed different assessment measures that they're going to focus on month by month in the upcoming years. So for each of these slides, I'm not going to read it all to you. Again, this is recorded if you want to come back to it, and all of these goals are available in the PDF link that I dropped 2 links ago. But their first 2 goals focus on ELA assessment, so the PSSA for English Language Arts. And they're focusing on where students were August of the 1920 school year to where they hope to grow by the year of 2026. You'll see that that's a consistent date listed on all of these goals. So this 35.7% proficiency is the baseline. It's where the city is starting. And for each of these goals, there are separate learning indicators, ways that the board is going to zoom in when they're looking at the city schools performance and Henry's performance, right? So the 2 learning indicators for this goal focusing on students in grades 3 to 8. So those are the grades for standardized testing, and whether or not kids are at or above grade level for our reading assessments that we give on the school level. So if you've joined me in previous meetings, I've talked about how we use the Ames Web assessment in grades kindergarten to 5th grade and the STAR reading and math assessment in our upper school, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So that's the first indicator. And then the second indicator is going to take that data and we're going to look at it in a more specific way with a different lens, focusing on subgroups. There was a question this morning about, what subgroups are we specifically talking about? I don't have that information at this time, but the best prediction that I could make is analyzing it based on racial demographic data, thinking about males versus female students. We think about students with IEPs versus students who are in the general education setting, English language learners, as well as students who qualify for free or reduced lunch. So these statistics, this little bar graph gives you a greater sense of where C.W. Henry School is. So you'll see that across the city, the school district is at 35.7% of students proficient on the ELA exam in grades 3 to 8. At C.W. Henry School, we are about 20 points higher than that. We're at 56.2%. Which is wonderful, but we still have a lot of work to do, right? And this number right here in the lighter blue indicates growth from the previous year. There were obviously not standardized exams in the 1920 school year due to our school closure for COVID. There has not been an official announcement on whether PSSA exams will be postponed for this current school year, but this just gives you a sense of where we're starting. Obviously, we have a lot of growth to make, but it looks a little different than the citywide landscape. And so this bar graph at the bottom just breaks down the PSSA performance data. And again, this is grades 3 to 8 and the categories that each of our students are in. The bar represents the 18-19 school year and the dot represents the previous year. So that would be the 17-18 school year. Of course, we have to interpret this with a grain of salt because some of these students are no longer at C.W. Henry School. For example, our current fourth graders are not captured in this data because they didn't take standardized exams last year. Similarly, the eighth graders in this data have now moved on to high school. But it is the most current data that we are able to work from. That was a lengthy explanation. I won't go into that much detail for each goal. But the second goal similarly focuses on ELA, except this zooms in on our third grade learners. So typically, the trend that we see across the school district of Philadelphia when students take standardized exams for the first time is that their performance is not very high, right? So in 2019, 32.5% of students scored proficient or advanced on the PSSA. Similar to the last goal, the learning indicators zoom in on their performance on our reading assessments during the year. That would be the Ames Web assessment for third grade. And then similarly, focusing in on subgroups. So at C.W. Henry School, I am very proud to say that in the 18-19 school year, 68.6% of our third graders scored proficient or advanced. That is very high, very far above what we saw happening, on average across the rest of our city. And it was an 8.3% increase from the previous year. That's phenomenal. Of course, we always have more work to do, right? We're thinking about who are those other roughly 32% of students. I think this is important to share because our statistic from last year actually exceeds where the city wants to see students grow by 2026. But what that doesn't mean is that we're going to, sit back, put our feet up, relax. We absolutely have work to do. So as the district shares more information around these goals and guardrails, it is my hope in partnership with parents and other family members that we think about the quantitative and qualitative measures that are connected to this goal that are really relevant and important for C.W. Henry. Following a similar pattern, the third goal focuses on math performance, right, for grades 3 to 8. I will say that across the entire city, and this is true for C.W. Henry School, the percentage of students who are proficient or advanced on the math assessment is lower than compared to the ELA assessment. Across the city, only 21.5% of students in grades 3 to 8 are proficient or advanced on our math assessment. Similarly, the indicators focus on the mid-year assessment. So we do an Ames Web assessment in math for grades K to 5 and a STAR assessment in math for grades 6 to 8. And then thinking exactly for the other goals around subgroups. So this gives you a greater sense of where we were as a C.W. Henry community on the last standardized test data that is available. So we are, again, higher than what the city's baseline measure is, but not by much. And there is obviously a lot of work to do, especially when you compare and contrast the bar graph you see at the bottom of this graphic with the last slide for ELA. We see many fewer students in proficient or advanced. And we do see that students grew, but we need to make sure that that growth is truly expedited and that what we're doing in our classrooms is turning into meaningful, students are achieving. So shifting on from the goals, there are, first of all, let me say there are additional goals, but they're relevant for high schools. So I have not included them in this presentation, but if you have a student in high school and you want to know more about it, click the PDF that I dropped in the chat earlier. You can read all about them. So here are 4 guardrails that I think are also incredibly important and interesting too. These are things that the School District of Philadelphia hasn't always addressed in a public forum. And as a school leader, I'm really excited to see that there's going to be a focus in the School District of Philadelphia on these various topics. So I'm not going to read this slide to you verbatim, but as you can see, this first guardrail focuses on schools being safe, welcoming, and healthy places. In blue, I highlighted some of the measures that they're going to use across the district to measure, how close we are to achieving these goals. So every spring, the district launches a district-wide survey. It is quite a lengthy survey that I can promise you I'll be pestering you to submit virtually for each of your children at Henry. And it's truly an important tool that we use to get feedback on my performance as a principal, on our teachers' performance in meeting your students' needs, and then also thinking more generally around instruction and climate. So I don't have that data to share from last year currently, but I can definitely share that in upcoming meetings to talk about areas of our school where we know we need to do a little bit more work, and also areas that we can celebrate. These second and third indicators, I think, are really interesting and important ones as well. So the second indicator is pointing to the percentage of schools that are certified as lead safe and identified as having no asbestos detected. They're using the acronym NAD. So that data has not been made available yet, but it is something that you can expect, I would say, in 2021, when the district and the Board of Education is, more publicly sharing where we are at these goals right now. And then this third indicator is also a new one. They're seeking to increase the percentage of schools that have at least 2 full-time equivalent positions for 500 students. So we have around 500 students at Henry who explicitly and solely support student mental and behavioral health needs. So we do have a school counselor. We have interns who are, they're graduate students, but they do work with us. But there are additional positions that the district has built out across the city. There are counselors who are focusing specifically on behavioral health and mental health. And if you join Dr. Height's Facebook Lives on Wednesdays or listen to any of his public town halls, he's talked about that a little bit in the past. At Henry School, we have not had additional staffing to focus on this area, but you can see that it is the school district's goal to increase by almost 30 percentage points. Right? Roughly 153 schools will be receiving this resource. This one is also really exciting. We had a great conversation about this morning. The school district is seeking to increase the percentage of students who have what they're calling well-rounded educational experiences with co-curricular opportunities. So for our elementary students, that talks about the opportunities kids have to participate in visual arts and performing arts, which is absolutely an emphasis at CW Henry School. And I'm glad to see that it's something the district has committed to remaining, it's integrated into the school experience. This third guardrail, it says, right, every parent and guardian will be welcomed and encouraged to be partners in their school's community. So again, the district for this, their indicator is the district-wide survey, which is going to be coming out in the spring. We had a conversation in this morning's meeting around, as a parent, when you submit those survey results, who does it go to, right? Is it going directly to the principal? Is it going directly to the school team? Is it going to the district at 440 North Broad Street? And how are those results truly interpreted and put into practice? So I was able to share this morning that some of the results are shared publicly on our school's progress report, which are all available on the Henry website, or if you go onto the School District of Philadelphia's website, you can see the progress reports for all city schools. So some of the results from our survey are publicly shared in that place. Other ones are shared directly with me. And there are some questions that I don't receive the responses to. I would assume that they stay downtown and they use that for planning purposes. And this last indicator on this guardrail is one that we're absolutely proficient in at CW Henry School. We have an active school advisory council that meets absolutely 3 times a year. We meet once a month. But I would say it's my hope that we can just continue to grow who comes to our SAC, who's represented, whose voices are heard, and then again, how we take action based on those conversations. And the last guardrail that I want to share for you today is one that I was very excited to see in the board's presentation. So it says that our students' potential will not be limited by the practices that perpetuate systemic racism and hinder student achievement. So really what it's pointing out the steps that the district has committed to taking as an anti-racist organization. And I know at C.W. Henry School, we definitely have some work to do in that area. We had a great conversation this morning about indicator 4.1, which says it's considering the 8th grade students who are qualified to attend special admission high schools. So if you have a child who's gone through the school selection process or high school selection process, you know that measures such as a child's attendance, their grades on their report card, historically their standardized test data, and any behavioral data are all used sometimes in addition to an interview or like on-task writing assignment that students need to do in order to be accepted to some of our most competitive high schools in the city. So the district, has taken a stance that they would like to increase the percentage of students, particularly Black and Brown students, who are eligible for special admit high schools. And the second indicator focuses on disproportionality, right? And the percentage of suspensions that are occurring in schools. I'm very proud to say that suspension is not something that occurs regularly at C.W. Henry School. We have single digit suspensions each year. But that isn't to say that we don't have work to do and ways that we could grow in this area, particularly when we're thinking about some lower level behavioral data and what does that look like when we think about racial subgroups or male versus female students. So I know that that was a lot of information. That was the last guardrail that I'm sharing with you today. But I wanted to share it because, first of all, it was brought up in a board presentation, and I know many of our families log on or listen to those. And this is a new conversation that honestly was started in the last month or so. And I do think it's going to have a significant impact on the way that we talk about goals, school-based goals. We have academic goals, but when we think around some of these guardrails, historically, in the past couple of years, we haven't had quantitative or qualitative goals that align to these guardrails. So this is really the first exposure to this information. I do welcome any questions or comments. I've saved a lot of questions and comments from those family members who were able to log on this morning. But I hope you appreciated that information. It's a goal of mine to make sure that our parent community stays as informed as possible with all of the new things that happen pretty much daily in the school district of Philadelphia. So that was the last of the information that I wanted to present for this evening. If you did log on with us and missed the beginning, I pointed out that tomorrow I'm going to send out a letter for interim reports and remind parents on the ways that you can access your child's grades halfway through the second marking period. That was one of the most important lessons we learned from the first marking period, that a lot of this interim reporting period went unnoticed by many parents. I think it's very different because we're not receiving the normal piece of paper in your child's communication folder. So be on the lookout for that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen at this time. And if you have any questions about any of the information I shared, this is the time to come off mute and share your question. I don't think I see any questions right now in the chat. Are there anyone who wants to ask a question at this time?
Hi, it's Orion.
Hey, Orion, I missed you this morning. Nice to see you.
Yes, I had a dentist appointment this morning. I would have preferred to be on the family forum meeting. It's not really so much a question. I just wanted to say first, thank you for sharing the goals and guardrails information. I was waiting for the ones that you shared on that last slide. Those, not that the other ones aren't important, obviously, but those were the ones that I was like, let's see if we get to talk about that a little bit. Especially,
wasn't that exciting? It's the first time.
It is, especially in conjunction with what we're doing with the SAC, as around those kinds of things. So I will be completely transparent and say I do have a little bit of skepticism, but that's just like normal. That's normal. I feel like that's normal. now that they've rolled it out publicly and said that these are their goals, then at least that way we can hold them accountable. I just am hopeful that it's not just like lip service. Like I hope that there are going to be more concrete things rolled out so we can see this in action, especially when you're looking at a difference between the current percentages of Black and Brown students who are going to special admit schools, and then you juxtapose that against the current number of Black and Brown kids who are being suspended in the district. It's like those are pretty stark numbers to see together. I feel like there's a lot of work that could be done in in both those arenas, and I feel like they're connected. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to see that that's going to be something that we can hold the district accountable for. And the only other thing I wanted to say is I get that there needs to be, when we're talking about like ELA and math, that there needs to be some changes. I just, like anybody else, I'm just like, is this the right time to really be rolling those things out? Because you have so, we're obviously we're still doing remote learning, and with that, you have some students that, for a number of reasons, aren't even able to take full advantage of remote learning, who might not be signing on at all or might be behind. So I just hope that when the district is gathering these numbers for next year, that they will be mindful of that and recognize all the obstacles that the kids are facing, even the kids who are doing well, if you will, because socially, they have other issues that can also affect their academic performance. So that was the only thing that stood out to me. I was just like, is this the time to really be rolling out new
Yeah.
metrics? Because it's, there's so much going on, not just for the kids, but for the teachers as well. So that was
Absolutely.
something else that stood out to me. But
Yeah. I appreciate you saying that. I shared this morning how I think I'm kind of like jumping the gun in talking about this in a town hall forum. I don't know of any of my other colleagues who are doing that, but it's important to me that we process it as a community. And I
mhm,
think I have a similar hope as well, that it's not just lip service,
yeah,
specifically around like anti-racism practices at our school. But we're in control of our own actions. So I do hope to use these goals and guardrails as a starting point to set the bar for Henry.
right,
Definitely not for right now. We got a lot on our plate right now, but
right.
as the district rolls out, like, what does this mean in daily practice? I hope that we can continue to have conversations about that at Henry. And I do think it goes hand in hand with some of the projects we've taken on in the SAC, which is awesome.
Yeah, agree. I agree. So thank you for sharing that. It's really, I didn't get to attend the board meeting when they rolled it out, but so thank you for giving that additional detail. I appreciate
Yeah.
it.
And the board had shared that they'd had a number of community forums where they sought feedback from different members. I wasn't aware of them, otherwise I would have publicized them at Henry. But I
Right.
do know that as a principal, I had the opportunity, I think it was last week, to just give some feedback directly to the board around these goals and guardrails. And my feedback, similar to what you said about math and ELA, it was just, what does this mean in practice? Like, what are
Right.
you get to a point where you can only ask people to do so much without spreading them too thin.
Right.
And I think in a district, and we're not excluded from this, but in a district where the math achievement is so abysmal and so low, I think we really have to take a step back and ask those hard questions of why, because doing more of the same is not benefiting anybody.
Agree. Especially when we're talking about like a math proficiency or advanced. That's at, I think you said 21.5% across the district.
Yeah.
Like, yes, I'm just like, what can we do to bolster those numbers? Obviously, again, like we said, this might not be the optimum time to do that, but obviously we need to look at that and see what we could be doing better. So let's
But
hope.
I appreciate a long-term goal rather than saying we're going to do something for a year and then quit and do something else. Like,
Right,
to 2026, there can be some real change. So
right. I agree. As long as we're not, as long as, and for that reason, I see why they would roll it out now. I'm just like, hopefully people will be mindful of the challenges, placed on everyone, on all the stakeholders, the students, the parents, the teachers, the principals, administrators, like just be mindful with the current environment. This is not typical. So just, keep that in mind when you're rolling these things out. And further, don't use it as an excuse to not do things.
Right.
So
I appreciate that reminder.
Can I ask a question on an unrelated topic?
Sure.
I was just curious if the after school programs are going to continue online, January or winter, whatever it's considered.
Sure. Which after school program are you talking about?
So the only one we knew about was Girls on a Run, which was awesome. Mr. Jacobs did a phenomenal job. I heard the music teacher, I think it was a music teacher during one of the classes, asking the kids how come no one signed up. And I heard all the kids say they never received the list of after school programs. So that was happening.
Yeah, so we tried to launch some extracurricular in the fall. There was, I'm trying to remember now, something for music. There was a book club. Miss Paulina was hoping to do a dance club. It was really owned by the teacher. We had limited signups, so they didn't come into fruition. We did have a debate club, which was separate, and Girls on the Run, which was separate. But it's something that we're going to try again in the winter. I think in the fall, it was like people were a little bit overwhelmed and some families were turned off by more screen time, but I definitely think there's an interest.
Yeah, Girls on the Run was fabulous.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I'm glad to hear because this was the first year we did it.
Yeah, and I can share debate has been awesome. It's been really great.
That's awesome. I was bummed out, Betta, because I can't watch them virtually. Only participants can, but I heard really good things.
Yeah, I was so mad because Roses started really late and I was sitting there waiting and then I had a meeting and anyway, so I missed her, but I can totally sneak in and see what they're doing.
Yeah, they've had 2 competitions and it's going to continue, I think, into 2021, which is great.
Yeah, and I think they do have space for more kids if any other kids are interested. It's run by Miss Canarini. It's for, I think, only 6th through 8th graders.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's only graders yet, but I think that they have space for more kids.
Yeah, I can ask her to share that. I don't know if they take people mid-season, but definitely it's one of those clubs that we do have year after year. So if your child is interested in debate, and it's only in the fall, it doesn't go year long. Any other questions at this time?
I just want to ask about, I know you and I have talked about iReady, so you're going to be surprised that I'm asking you about this again, but is there a new requirement from the district that every kid is using iReady now? Is it, or is it like a school specific decision?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's school specific. We talked about this actually a little bit this morning as well. So iReady, for those parents who are not familiar, is our research-based intervention program that we use at the school. So it's purchased out of our Title I budget. And so if your child, the short answer about it is that we have recommendations for some kids, but for children who are academically maybe struggling a little bit, there are some, I don't know if I call it a mandate, but I do push for teachers to create the time and space for them to be on the interventions more. So if your child is in tier 1, meaning that they're at grade level in reading or math, there's a recommendation of 30 to 45 minutes per week for each subject area. So I've told the teachers that this is a great resource to use during asynchronous learning. For children who struggled in the first marking period or academically are a little bit below where we would hope that they'd be at this time, the requirement at Henry is 30 to 45 minutes, right? So most teachers break that up across the week. They'll do 10 minutes a day in each subject, or 15 minutes depending on the grade that kids are in. I will say that, so that's not anything new. I will just say that historically, we haven't always adhered to it. And so I've been pushing teachers specifically for our kids who we know need a little bit of extra support to make sure that kids get logged on. But if your child is at or above grade level, it is a recommendation. It's not a core requirement.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I would say, it's important to me because we dedicate a significant amount of our budget towards iReady. And unfortunately, we don't have an intervention teacher for math or an intervention teacher for reading. So the computer-based intervention does become more important. In the virtual environment, admittedly, it's not everybody's favorite thing because everything's virtual, but it is something that's consistent from last year. Any other questions?
Just, Kate, I'm gonna send you an email, like within the next hour or so. It's not urgent. I just wanted to give you a heads up so you would, I know you have a ton of emails, so just so you would see it. It's nothing urgent. It's not, there's nothing bad in it. I'm just giving
Okay.
you a heads up.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
My inbox is going to be at 0 for 2021. That's my gift to myself.
Okay,
I'm pretty close to it right
that's good.
now. Well, this is the last meeting of 2020. I will say that I have a whole calendar of meetings for winter. It's actually attached in the letter for tomorrow. You'll see our meeting dates all the way up until mid-March. So please pencil them in if you are somebody who likes to join in. They're always at 10 and at 5. You can always send me an email or send me a direct message if you have a question. But thanks for taking the time on this December evening. I hope everybody has a wonderful, restful break and is able to disconnect.
Thank
And
you.
Kate, can
Thank
I
you.
just say,
Thank you.
we, for the SAC, we are going to use one of the family forums for a public SAC meeting. So we'd love if everyone on this call joined whenever, if you can put that in the note that it'll be a, whatever date we decided was a SAC
The
meeting.
11th. Absolutely. Yeah.
That'd be great.
Thanks, Beth. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.
everybody.
Happy
Thanks,
holidays.
everyone.
Happy holidays.
Thank
Everyone have a great
you.
holiday.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Happy holidays, everyone.